Agnipath scheme continue across India. A nationwide Bharat Bandh has been called against the scheme today and normal life was hit across parts of the country. According to reports, schedules of around 500 trains were hit because of the protests. The Bandh call also led to massive traffic jams around the national capital, especially on the Delhi, Gurugram and Delhi-Noida highways. As of now, the Indian Army has released a notification announcing recruitment rallies will begin from July. The issue has also not escaped politicization. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has attacked the BJP, saying the centre is using the scheme to increase its party cadre base. The Congress too has supported protesters, saying the scheme is not viable. Meanwhile, amidst all of this, Prime Minister Modi is in Karnataka for a two-day visit and speaking at an event in Bengaluru. The PM, without outrightly naming the Agnipath scheme, did say that some steps may look unfair but are important for nation building.
स्टार्टअप्स और इनोवेशन का रास्ता आराम का, सुविधा का नहीं है और बीते 8 सालों में देश को इस रास्ते पर तेजी से बढ़ने का रास्ता भी आसान नहीं था, सुविधा का नहीं था। कई फैसले, कई रिफॉर्म तात्कालिक रूप से अप्रिय लग सकते हैं, लेकिन समय के साथ उन रिफॉर्म्स का लाभ आज देश अनुभव करता है। रिफॉर्म का रास्ता ही हमें नए लक्ष्यों, नए संकल्पों की तरफ ले जाता है।
And meanwhile, while the protests against Agnipath rage on have turned violent in many parts, the key contention seems to be employment opportunities for the Agniveers who don't eventually get absorbed within the armed forces after the 4-year stint. Now, top corporate voices have spoken out in support of the scheme. Anand Mahindra was one of the first to speak out, tweeting that he was saddened by the violence. He also said that the Mahindra Group will welcome the opportunity to hire trained and disciplined Agniveers. Harsh Goenka has also mirrored those sentiments. Kiran Mazumdar spoke out about it, as did several other head honchos of corporate India. In fact, there was a statement later in the day by N. Chandra, the Tata Sons chairman, also saying that there would be great opportunities for the Agniveers, including in the Tata Group. Now, a short while ago, I spoke with Kiran Mazumdar, executive chairperson of the Biocon Group, and asked her what exactly these skills were that the Agniveers would have that make them attractive for jobs in the private sector. Well, protests against the Agnipath scheme continue across India. There was a nationwide Bharat Bandh today, and the contention seems to be that what will be the employment opportunities for the Agniveers, the 75% who don't really get absorbed into the armed forces on a regular service basis. Now, the interesting development today is all of the corporates who have come out and said that the Agniveers will be eminently hireable, employable, and they would love to give them an opportunity. So you had names like Anand Mahindra, who tweeted today that he was saddened by the violence and that the Mahindra Group will welcome the opportunity to hire those trained and disciplined Agniveers. You had Harsh Goenka speak out. Just a short while ago, N. Chandra of Tata Sons has said something similar, and there's a slew of corporate leaders. Among them, of course, is Kiran Mazumdar, chairperson of Biocon, who is joining us now on the show. She's also backed the idea that Agniveers can have an advantage over others when it comes to the job market, and she's speaking with us exclusively right now. Ms. Shaw, thank you so much for speaking with us on ET Now. Let me begin by just getting you to explain why you think Agniveers will have an advantage over others as employees. That is some of the things that you have tweeted today. Can you please spell that out for us?
Look, I think most industries look for some level of training when they hire, people into their organizations. And I personally believe that army training is extremely valuable because such people are very disciplined. They are very good project managers, and they can be part of project teams in a very big way, because I think all companies are looking at, trained, disciplined personnel, and what better place than the army to provide this?
That's fine, ma'am. But, in like to like, training, discipline are broad indicators. In a 4-year armed forces tenure, one would assume that the Agniveers are going to learn about physical combat or things which are not necessarily useful in private sector. So, for example, in your company, in what departments would you want to hire these Agniveers?
No, I don't agree with you, Tamanna. It is not just physical combat that they're trained on. They are trained on how do you basically, use your skills to basically dismantle or assemble, any kind of ammunition or cars or trucks or whatever they are dealing with. And I think they are also told how to do it in a very systematic way. So the training that you get in an army is very different to the kind of training that you get elsewhere. And that's why I believe that many of us actually hire a large number of ex-service people so that, we get these disciplined people.
Areas do you hire ex-service people, ma'am? Can you give us some insight into that? How many ex-service people are you hiring right now and in what areas?
So I think that we do a lot of administrative jobs where we take on, ex-servicemen. We also hire them for project management teams, and we of course do have ex-servicemen who are heading security services for us. So a large number of jobs. I mean, it's not just one type of job.
The other interesting aspect is how we've had so many voices from corporate India come out and talk about placement of Agniveers in the middle of this huge controversy and protests, etc. All of these voices have come together. You have also spoken. What is the context to this, ma'am? Has there been sort of a message or a nudge that corporate India should come out and stand with this scheme?
Let me categorically said that we have done it on our own. There has been no nudge to corporate India. I personally believe that this is a very, very innovative army reform or armed forces reforms that the government is undertaking. And I'm willing to support it because I think it's good for the country and good for employment opportunities for such people who are being recruited under the scheme. So let me be very emphatic. None of us have got nudges, at least not me.
Ma'am, in that sense, then why the resistance from corporate India when it comes to something like reservation in the private sector over domicile? That is something many state governments, many parties have been pushing for. And at that point, there is a very different response.
Let me stop you right there. Please do not confuse reservation with recruiting such people who I personally believe have an advantage in the recruitment process. So I'm just trying to tell you, like for like, if I have an army trained person and someone who's not trained in the army, like for like, I would choose the army person. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So I really believe that it's not a question of reservation. It is a question of capability and competence that I think will be provided to these young men and women who I think will get a good employment opportunity thereafter.
Okay, so I get that. You're saying that corporate India will not come and give any 8%, 10%, any reservation, but they're saying that compared to others, the fact that they've gone through this makes them more hireable as employees. But then let me come to the point of the protest so far, because the response to it has been some promises of reservation, promises of enrollment in government jobs, etc. Do you think that is the right response? And the way this entire scheme was communicated was perhaps flawed because it has led to a complete furor.
I personally believe that this kind of an innovative scheme needs to be evangelized. Okay, I think the government needs to evangelize this scheme and make people understand the rationale behind doing this. I think that has not been done properly, I feel. And that is why you're having so many protests. If young people understand what the government is trying to do and how it is going to benefit them in the long term, I don't think you will have such a major protest. So I know that there have been various comments made on the fact that even existing ex-servicemen don't find placement in government jobs despite there being quota systems. That's not for me to comment. Why the government is not hiring them is not for me to comment. All I am saying is that the corporate sector or corporate India I think, is doing its bit to hire as many ex-servicemen as they can. And I think we find them very competent. And I think a lot of ex-servicemen do join the private sector. But there are many ex-servicemen who prefer to be in the government sector. And when they don't get jobs, they believe that the system is not working. So I think there is some kind of an assessment and an evaluation that needs to be done as to why this is not working within the public system. But I can tell you that corporate India does absorb a large number of ex-servicemen.
Just, and I want to bring in one point that you're right, corporate India does absorb a large number of ex-servicemen, but they are in a different age range. Because right now, with the current 17-year tenure, even if these servicemen come in at 17, 18, they are quote-unquote retiring and joining the private space at 32, 33 or thereabouts. In the Agniveer scheme, you're talking about people who could be as young as 22, 23.
That's better. That's even better for us.
Is that better? Wouldn't you have to train them all over again?
I would love to have young army-trained people in our workforce.
Okay. As far as the protests are concerned, ma'am, one point behind the protests is this an indication of the employment problem in India, where an armed forces or a government-backed job is seen as the ultimate security, and is that what we're seeing in the streets? Could that level of comfort at any point be replaced with a private sector job, which might pay you more but doesn't guarantee you lifelong employment?
Well, it is unsustainable to have a guaranteed lifelong employment where the government is the only employer of such large numbers. I think if you develop an economy based on that, it will not be sustainable. I think the private sector is the one that has to provide employment. And the public service can only, the public sector can only provide a certain number of jobs, but the private sector has to provide a large number of such jobs. And when I talk about public sector, I don't mean public sector, enterprises. I think they're talking about government jobs, within the established government services. And that's where they're not finding the job opportunities, but I think they should look elsewhere.
So, on the larger employment issue, ma'am, since I have the opportunity to speak to you right now, a lot of people have been commenting how the protests are an indication and a symptom of the unemployment issue we have in India, where private sector has the creamy jobs, but it's relatively less and not nearly enough for the large number of youth, employable youth we produce every year. Your comment on that and how that can change?
Look, whether you have Agnipath or not, I think the number of jobs we are talking about under this scheme is certainly not going to address our unemployment problems, okay? I think this is only addressing it in a certain way, and I think it's very welcome and innovative. But I think if you're talking about employment in a larger way, it's about creating larger employment opportunities through infrastructure projects, through many, many other kinds of, the new economy jobs that are being created, whether it is in the form of delivery services, whether it is in the form of the gig economy. I think there are lots of jobs that can be created, but that's a very, very different, debate that we need to have. The number of jobs we are talking about under the Agnipath scheme is certainly not something that you should tie to the employment issue.
The only connection really is the anger that you've seen spill out onto the streets, where people are fearing that they will lose the number of quote-unquote guaranteed jobs that they would have had.
I think the anger is misplaced, because I think no one should be entitled to lifelong guaranteed jobs by the government. I think the government also needs to reform and provide jobs which it can sustain. And I think that is why young people in this country must grow up knowing that they must seek opportunities beyond, Agnipath into other realms.
Question. I know that you responded very strongly when I asked the question about privatization, but the only reason I spoke about that is that with all of this overwhelming support coming in from India Inc. and top corporate voices, do you think it is necessary that companies maybe get together and come and give some kind of certainty to how many jobs will be on offer in the private space or how many can be absorbed, which would actually give some relief to these Agniveers?
Look, I think, Tamanna, we always adopt this kind of an approach to any of these issues, which is absolutely wrong. I think young men and women who join the Agnipath scheme should have confidence in the army system to instill and build capabilities and competence with which they can actually go out confidently and get jobs which will actually give them good career paths. That is the way I look at it. And I also believe that under the Agnipath scheme, the government, the armed forces ought to have a placement cell which can actually help these young men and women who can to find good placements, whether it is in the public sector or the private sector.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, for coming and speaking to us and speaking your mind as always.
Thank you.
Well, that was Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, and the big takeaway, I asked her this clearly, she spoke on it unequivocally. I asked if there'd been a nudge of any kind, which is why we saw a slew of India Inc. top honchos come out in support of the Agniveer scheme. She says nothing like that whatsoever, at least she is speaking from her heart.